In this video, we're going to go over a very brief introduction on how to program using the language Swift. To do this, we're going to download an application called Xcode. I already have Xcode on my computer, and it's down here. If you don't have Xcode, then just Google it and go to the download option. It's free to download. The only limitation is that you can only download it for Macintosh. You can't download for PC. We're going to create something called a playground, so just click right there. It doesn't look like a button, but it is a button. A playground is a way that we can explore code to see if it works or see what works. It's a way of experimenting and testing code before actually creating an app for the iPhone or an app for the iPad or something like that. So I'm just creating a blank playground, and I'm going to delete this stuff because we really don't need it. Okay, so the most basic way to use a playground is to simply type data into the playground. So let's type the number 42. And you'll see it appear in the sidebar right here, 42. Let's do another one. Let's do 71. And again, it's going to appear in the sidebar as 71. Now let's try typing in a word, like yellow. This is going to give us an error, which you'll see in a moment. Unfortunately, if you want to type a word or a combination of letters and numbers or symbols into the playground, you have to include quotations around it. And now give it a second, and it'll show yellow in the sidebar. So, important, if you want to do just a number, you can type it in like so. But if you want to do anything else, like an actual word, put it in quotation marks. You can also do some basic math operations using Swift. So let's say 5 plus 3. That's going to be 8, and as you can see, 8 shows up right here in the sidebar. How about subtraction? Let's do 6 minus 12. And this should be negative 6. There we go. Multiplication involves the use of an asterisk, so we'll do 5 times, that's an asterisk, 5 times 3. That'll be 15. And then we'll do 30 divided by 10. That'll give us 3. So these are the basic math operations right here. Now what happens if instead of doing 30 divided by 10, we do 30 divided by 0? This will give us an error message because just in general with math, you can't divide by 0. So if you break any rules of math, then you're going to get an error, and you'll be asked to fix the error before the program can function properly. So I'm going to fix it by going back to 30 divided by 10. Going back down here to yellow, we can update yellow to say maybe like yellow sun, and it'll update in the sidebar right here. If we add a number, let's say yellow sun 22, and then take the quotes off, even though we have a number right here, it still doesn't qualify. It still gives us an error message, as you'll see in a moment. There we go. So anytime you have a combination of letters or numbers or symbols, you have to include them inside quotes. The only time you can really use this without quotes is if you have just a regular number like so. Or, and this we'll talk about in a later video, but you can also put true or false. But again, this is not something you need to worry about quite yet. Let's also talk about something called a comment. And if you were paying attention, you would have seen this towards the beginning of this video. A comment is really any line of code that is designed specifically to only offer information for somebody reading the code. It has absolutely no impact on how the code executes or evaluates. So for example, if I put a comment on this line right here, then the 3 is going to disappear and this code will become not so much invalid, just it won't do anything. So to create a basic one-line comment, just put 2 slashes in front, and the 3 has disappeared. So this 30 divided by 10, all it is now is it's there for decoration. It doesn't actually do anything. I'm going to go ahead and remove the comment. And now I'll show you a second way to create a comment. This is if you want to comment out several lines at once. You do a slash and an asterisk for the beginning of the comment, and then you do the reverse for the end of the comment. So all 4 of these lines are commented out. Actually, technically, all 6 of these lines are commented out. And as you can see, all the numbers in the sidebar are gone. Now let's go ahead and talk about something different. Let's change direction and talk about something called a variable and a constant. Variables and constants are basically like placeholders or nicknames. You assign a value to them, and then you can use that value whenever you reference that variable. So that may not make a lot of sense right now. I'll show you what I mean right now. If you want to create something called a constant, you begin by typing the word let. And then you want to give it a name. So let's say x. And then we'll assign a value. So let's say it is 10. So what we've done is we've created a variable called x. X is assigned the value of 10. And because we used the let keyword right here, that means we are not allowed to change the value of x. So if, for example, I wanted to change the value of x to equal 14, we're going to get an error message because it's a constant. We can't change the value of a constant. I'll go ahead and comment this out because, we don't need that. It's an error. We still have the 10 up here, though, so x does equal 10. We just can't turn it into 14. However, if you want to create a variable that can be changed, then instead of doing let, you need to use the keyword var. So now we assigned a variable that can be changed. It's assigned the value of 10, like so. And down here, we've updated the value from 10 to 14. And if you look over here, it's now equal to 14. So that's the difference between let and var. So for example, if you wanted to say your age, you'd want to use a var because my age is 28. And if you're like me, you're going to get older every year. So your age isn't going to remain constant. So age equals age plus 1. So in 1 year, I'll be 29 years old. Age equals age plus 1 again. So here I am today. Here I am next year. And here I am the following year, right there. So age is updating. But if I want to have a constant, something that's not supposed to change, what's not going to change? Let's say my social security number. Now obviously I'm not going to tell you what my number is. I'll just make something up. So we'll say the social security number equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's my social security number. And then if I want to try to update my social security number to something else, it's not going to let me because it is a constant. So when you're creating variables, pay close attention to whether or not it should be a constant or if it should be a variable that can actually change over time. As you can see, it's very important to give your variables names that are meaningful. Let's quickly see how to use variables to perform math operations. So earlier we did things like 3 plus 5 or 2 times 8 or something like that. But that's not always the most efficient way to perform math. So let's create a few constants. And in fact, I'll pause the video and then resume when I'm done. Okay, here we are. I created 3 constants, and I updated this formula a little bit to kind of like be similar to the constants. So what we have here, we have two basic equations, and what we did here is something called hard coding. So these equations will always be 2 plus 5, or 2 times 8. It'll always be like that. We have to manually update these equations to change them. But we can replicate these equations by instead using variables. So here's an example. So 2 plus 5. Well, z is equal to 2. So z, which is 2, plus, then 5 is equal to y. So there we go. And we got 7 here and 7 down here. We'll replicate the second equation. So we have again 2, which is z, times, and then x, which is our 8. So again, 7, 16, 7, 16. Down here we hard-coded the equations, but up here we used variables, or rather constants. This may not seem like a huge deal right now, but think about it this way. If you're creating a mobile application for somebody to use, and let's say for example it's a calculator app for their phone, you want them to be able to enter values to add together, or subtract, or multiply or divide. You don't want to limit them to only being able to add 2 plus 5, or only multiply 2 times 8. You want them to be able to add, subtract, multiply, divide all numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity. And to do that, what you'll normally do is when the person types in a number that they want to add, or subtract, or multiply, or divide, that number is going to get assigned to a blank variable. And that variable will then be used in the equation. Now this is kind of getting ahead of myself, but that's the ultimate goal, is to learn how to take input from users, assign that input into a variable, and then use the variable to do some kind of math operation. Now in this example, we're not doing a very good job of creating descriptive variable names. Earlier we talked about like social security number or age. Those are descriptive variable names. We're going to go over one last example where I'll create several descriptive variable names, and we'll go over exactly what's happening. So let me pause the video, let me type up some code, and I'll meet you back in a minute. Alright, we are back, and let's take a look at what we have here. This is going to kind of like simulate a shopping list, and it'll show how much you've bought at the grocery store, how much you paid for, how much your total bill was. So let's take a look. So these three variables up here, they give the price of one apple, the price of one cookie, and the price of one loaf of bread. This variable gives the total quantity of apples purchased, the quantity of cookies purchased, and the quantity of bread loaves purchased. So, obviously, we can say that if we purchased 8 apples at the price of $1 per apple, then we spent a total of $8, right? 8 times 1 is 8. So let's go ahead and create some equations for these three right here. I went ahead and commented them out for right now, but let's remove one of the comments. So the total cost of all the apples purchased, that's going to be the price of the apple. And as you can see, as I'm typing the variable name, it actually gives us some options to choose from: apple price or apple quantity purchased, which correspond to this and this. So let's go apple price multiplied by apple quantity purchased. And that should give us 8. And there we go. We'll do the same thing for the other two. I'll pause the video and show you the results. Alright, we are back. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so it's easier to read everything. But anyhow, here we go. So 8 times 1 equals 8. We got 2 times 4 also equals 8. And then 2 times 2 equals 4. So we're using these variables up here to calculate results down here in these little statements. And if we make modifications up here, let's say that the apple price skyrockets to $4 a piece, that'll update this number automatically. So instead of being $8 in total, it'll be $32 in total. If you're familiar with how Microsoft Excel works to create formulas and automatically update numbers, that's very similar to how the Xcode playgrounds work. You can create equations, and the results will automatically update if the raw data gets updated. So let's go ahead and determine what our total cost is going to be. So let total bill, and that's going to equal the apple's total cost plus cookies total cost plus bread total cost. And we got 44, which if you add 32 plus 8 plus 4, that is in fact 44. So this is how most programming should work. You don't want to hard code specific numbers, but rather you want to use variables to perform certain calculations. And as the variables get updated, the calculation results will also be updated. And that's all I want to go over in this video. Hopefully this has been a good introduction to Swift. In my opinion, the most important part of this video is to understand how to use variables, how to assign numbers to variables, and then how to use those variables to calculate other variables like apples cost, cookies cost, etc., etc. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.